And I think we're supposed to just simply make it, to get to the end. That's it. That's the goal. So let's not be part of the problem and dehumanize spiritual leaders by putting them up on a pedestal where they should never be. And judgment begins in the house of God. What does that mean? Last week, Robert Morris was handed a grand jury indictment. An arrest warrant was issued, and yesterday he surrendered to the authorities and was released on bail. With this action against Morris and others like Lawson and Bickle and Evans and Lentz, victims will see justice, which for some is going to bring healing, and heads will pop up out of the sand. The scriptural qualifications for leadership will be taken more seriously so that failures of this magnitude will become few and far between, as it should be. Judgment begins in the house of God. Welcome to Morning Tea. Hello, I'm Joanne, Jolee, and I'm so glad you're here today. So the first thing I want to do is to say this. Remember that in every case of a fallen leader, there are hurt and damaged children. Morris's victim, Cindy Clemishire, was only 12 years old when her molestation began, and she has suffered for years. You may not know this, but it is a fact that molested children take an average of 20 years to come to terms with what happened and to break their silence if they even can. And this is why in so many jurisdictions there's no statute of limitations on this heinous crime. You may remember Lentz, who was fired from Hillsong in 2020 after extramarital affairs were exposed. There was a recent report that he had been hired by another church, and as I was searching for updates on this, I bumped into his new podcast and an episode where he filmed an interview with his 3 teenage children about the impact of adultery on them and the family.
Trying, in my brain, the toxic part of it is trying to turn us on you guys and try to see their side of it when it's just, in my opinion, the people that dipped, regardless if they had their own stuff and their own at the end of the day, we were the kids. Yeah. Those were my siblings. Yeah. That was my 10-year-old brother. That was my sister in the hospital. That was me, 16, not knowing what I'm doing. And people thought that was okay to just comment, even the social media part of it, talking about you guys. People just forgot that there were kids involved. Yeah. Right. And family and cousins and moms and grandmas. And it makes me think of them now as cowards, to be completely honest, because of their intimidation to their own story, they couldn't even look into the kids' eyes and encourage us. Even if they felt however they felt about you guys, they couldn't give us any kind of support.
Carl asked his children how they felt now, 4 years down the road.
When you guys would communicate and kind of bicker a little bit, it was super like this. Yeah. And she's like it was just like that the whole time. Much. Up and down. And now you move forward with mom specifically with such, it's like ease and elegance. It's like you're working so much harder than you were. You were working so hard when we were younger, but in the way of preparing sermons for the church, being on, you were working hard for us, but it wasn't how it is now. We are the only priority. Yeah. There is no other priority except us and mom.
And in another episode, he and his wife talked about their fight to save the marriage and keep the family together.
And one of the first steps of making things right is to admit exactly what you've done. And I wasn't being selfless. It wasn't for the greater good. Right. I stayed in lies because it was more convenient for me. And it was the selfish option that made sense to me. That's the truth.
Which is it's not just in infidelity, it's in anything that has a hold on you. Yeah. Like alcohol, like drugs, like whatever your vice is, like shopping, like whatever, social media, whatever your addiction or whatever is.
Maybe people don't know the first time you said you forgave me was last year. Right. I think that's maybe someone might have imagined you just saying you forgive me. It wasn't like that. You were, I think what I felt like to me, you were giving me an opportunity to see what I was going to do with this information. that I found.
You had broken every piece of trust.
Yeah.
The betrayal part of infidelity is, it's so beyond what you can even, I can't even explain the feeling or explain what that betrayal does to a woman or to a man, whatever the situation is. But for me, that betrayal is so big. And so I had to heal and I had to do all the things, and I had to watch you do your work and get the help you needed. But I also had to, I wanted to keep a little bit of a wall up because I didn't want to get hurt again. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to be put in that same position to be hurt again. And so I had to protect myself, and I didn't wait a long time. I never felt like I couldn't say it. I literally couldn't say, I forgive you. It took me 3.5 years to say that. And so for me, that was a really long journey, but I really needed to have that space. I needed to be able to see and trust you. And you did the work of the trust, of building trust again.
So clearly they've been working very hard and successfully to repair a calamity. I was really moved by this, and I'm so glad for this family. I think this is the beauty of contrition, true repentance, forgiveness, and in the body of Christ where there is real love, fellowship can be fully restored. And I hope that the Lentz family can be a light to other families struggling through the same horrible trauma. But with the arrest of Robert Morris, churches across the country are going to take a sober look at what may be coming for them if they don't clean house now. A board-certified attorney who represented victims of Jeffrey Epstein and is currently representing 10 victims for civil lawsuits against a former youth pastor, said churches should treat the news of Morris's indictment as a warning to become more vigilant against abuse. Churches should be focused on training and educating their leadership to be sensitive and alert to any potential for inappropriate activities. Oftentimes in the religious setting, leaders will excuse what appears to be inappropriate behavior and hope that it goes away or does not continue to occur. Burying your head in the sand and failing to address problems seriously will almost always result in a tragedy. It is unfortunate that this warning comes from an attorney. The need for crystal clear transparency and accountability in all things, a leader has to be above reproach. And if they had maintained this standard with Robert Morris, it's highly likely none of this would have happened. By the way, the dictionary defines reproach as shame or disgrace that brings rebuke. And in the 1 Timothy 3 list of disqualifiers, he failed in several. He was not faithful to his wife. He lacked self-control. He was a recent convert. And with those strikes alone against him, the elders had enough reason to not put him into any leadership position from where he could fall and bring shame to the church. It was utterly responsible for them, actually, to put a young man, a new convert, into a preaching role. He himself admitted that he began to preach having not been a Christian for about a year, and he called it pretty heady stuff for someone so young. And as is predicted to happen in these cases, he fell into disgrace and into the devil's trap. When God put together the what we need to know word, the Bible, it was important that we get the details on David, the man after God's own heart, the fearless giant slayer whose magnificent songs have been preserved and sung for thousands of years. This is unheard of. This is staggering for any musician to think about that. There's no match for any other musician, and the longevity of his songs, very special. But David had slid into a state of self-deceit. It was so bad that when Nathan the prophet came with that story of the rich man who took the only dearly loved precious lamb from the poor man and killed it for a meal, David still didn't get it. Not until the finger was pointed at him. You are the man. You are the man. That is not just a rebuke of David, it's a stark reminder for all of us that we're never going to be immune from temptation and of the terrible consequences that will happen if we slide away and despise God's goodness to us. This example of David is supposed to put the proper fear of God into our deceitfully wicked hearts. And when our church leaders and elders fall, the discipline has to be public. It's very important. If a leader is really guilty and continues to do wrong, you must warn him. Do that when everyone in the church is there. They will hear what you say, and they will be afraid to do wrong things themselves. The arrest of Robert Morris is going to make many people think twice about their flirting with sin. It's going to cause the elders to be much more careful before they do place into authority a young, unproven man. God's not mocked. When we see hidden things revealed and we see the consequences, we're reminded how easily we could find ourselves in the same place, and that we are supposed to carefully and honestly, continuously examine ourselves. But it does seem that today the goals of churches are way too much about numbers and increase and wider influence, and there's tremendous pressure on pastors. Celebrity pastors, they're brought in to get those numbers up, and I think we're supposed to just simply make it. To get to the end, that's it. That's the goal, to get there unstained. We are supposed to be going quietly about the doing of religion without thinking about the how many. We're supposed to look out for the orphans and the widows in their affliction, keep ourselves unstained from the world. And like Paul said at the end, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Those were his goals. Just to finish the marathon and not get taken down, to keep fighting through to the end and have kept our faith so we don't have any ugly stains on ourselves, God willing. Robert Morris and the others in that same fallen place are suffering. The shame is intense. Entire families are turned upside down. For believers, any kind of suffering we endure is for our good. The kind of suffering from persecution is a special blessing, for the Spirit of glory and of God rests upon you. But if you suffer, it should not be as a murderer or thief or any kind of criminal. I appreciate Matthew Henry. He says, learn. 1, the best of men need to be warned against the worst of sins. 2, there is very little comfort in sufferings when we bring them upon ourselves by our own sin and folly. That suffering is due to punishment by authorities who are doing God's work. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents of wrath to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. And judgment begins in the house of God. What does that mean? Well, church discipline is part of that. For it is time for judgment to begin with God's household. And Henry again notes that the usual method of providence has been this. When God brings great calamities and sore judgments upon whole nations, he generally begins with his own people. And we can see an example of this in Isaiah. When the Lord has finished all his work against Mount Zion and Jerusalem, he will say, I will punish the king of Assyria for the willful pride of his heart and the haughty look in his eyes. The Gloaters are out in full force. It's vicious. A megachurch pastor has been taken down, but it's going to be much worse for them. If it begins with us, what will the outcome be for those who do not obey the gospel of God? And if it is hard for the righteous to be saved, what will become of the ungodly and the sinner? Have you ever noticed that on that list of qualifications for church leaders, there's no mention of education or of any certain level of biblical knowledge or degrees and doctorates and so on? No, it's all about character and maturity, having been tested and having 0 strikes on your record, none. So let's review. Faithful to wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not given to drunkenness, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money, able to manage his family well, have obedient children, not a recent convert, have a good reputation with outsiders, tested. And testing takes time. We need to see, how did the kids turn out? What do the children have to say about this man that they know very well? This man who now desires a good thing, and can he be a shepherd? Is there evidence that proves he knows about sheep and how to lead them with humility and gentleness? A senior pastor over 3 decades wrote, "The danger of putting spiritual leaders on pedestals." Pedestals are dangerous. Putting spiritual leaders on a pedestal is one of the worst things you can do for yourself and the most dangerous thing you can do for them. People often come into the church with a powerful mixture of expectations and illusions about what an uber spiritual person should be. And then they assume the pastor will embody that. But most churches aren't mega churches, and most spiritual leaders don't crash and burn in such dramatic fashion. They just drift. They find ways to keep a lid on their personal demons. They get really good at hiding who they really are and what they really struggle with. And even though they'd never say it, most church members are okay with this. But even more dangerous is what the pedestal does to the soul of the leader themselves. The leader who is dehumanized in this way is trapped by the expectations of other people. The leader may come to believe that they must keep their personal struggles and foibles hidden. And the reverse side of the problem for pedestals is that for some pastors, it tends to reinforce the tendencies of narcissism and pride. And when you add the fact that hundreds or maybe thousands of people are listening to the pastor speak God's truth to them each week, you have a dangerous mix. As someone said, this is like pouring Miracle Grow on one's character flaws. So what's the solution? He says that people in churches need to love their leaders more and look to them less. Spiritual leaders are just people. They have a mixture of gifts and a specific role to play. And I think that is great advice. So thanks for watching. Before I go, I want to remind you, look for the blessings because they are all around you.